Jasper Johns and Edvard Munch, Love, Loss, and the Cycle of Life, curated by John Ravenel, is on view at the VMFA until February 20th. The exhibit pulls Johns between the clock and the bedroom from the museum's permanent collection and expands upon the influences that would inspire his repetitious motifs. Munch's focus on themes of suffering and illness, as well as process, serve as the most significant parallels between the two. Reacting to pop, abstract expressionism, literature, music, and several cultural outlets, Johns appropriates iconography from all aspects of everyday life, from the widely recognizable to the more personal, constantly creating new images of the self. These methods of portraiture would come to include references to the AIDS epidemic's effect on the queer community. The work of Munch presented similarly highlights the decay of the self through ailments, including love and basic human interaction. As a forerunner to German Expressionism, Munch's figures convey internal and external stresses. His technique of mimicking wood grain as a means to emote these ways of expression are present through prints and paintings, as in John's Savern Can series. The main focus is on John's work as inspired by Munch, as emphasized by the entrance into John's early cross-hatching experiments. Therefore, his works dominate the 9 separate rooms, more often in quantity than size, and are supported by Munch's works of equal but more often smaller proportion. Intro panels will begin to connect Johns and Munch through postcards and retrospectives Johns would encounter. There's an effort to expose cross-hatching as the main motif, considering John's 10 years handling of it, but it will soon disappear after the Between the Clock and the Bedroom series is shown. It takes a while to develop this connection, as the viewer is introduced to several other linking ideas first that overlay and incorporate themselves into the design. Beyond the opening gallery, the first effort to connect his and Munch's work instead emerges through Savern cans and wood grain. Of the 128 works in the show, a vast majority are prints, so we're met with several editions of the Savern can and a few of Munch's The Kiss. Unfortunately, the works were almost divided in the room and would have done better for comparison to stagger prints from each. The next gallery contains Munch's self-portrait with brushes, which may have served better previously to signify John's brushes as an indexical sign for his own self-portrait. However, there is great attention to John's continued incorporation of body prints, which mimic Munch's 1895 portraits. Body printing and language remain extremely important in representing the queer figure as signified by combinations of the two. Ravenel expands upon body talk and late cross-hatchings. Signs of sex and death overlay John's signature markings, making reference to the looming AIDS crisis. Munch's work appropriately depicts life and death as coupled figures, also complemented by sex symbology. Here we're approaching John's attention to the most intimate details, including marginal scripts, as Munch did. The connection between Johns and Munch is the clearest from this gallery and forward. We see the chronological evolution of John's cross-hatchings from an empty motif into a shared one, but the time it takes to visually solidify the connection feels overextended. John's use of the motif is present and developing throughout, but the overt inspiration for it doesn't appear until midway. The hallway that follows this room marks the last appearance of the Savern can motif, dedicated solely to John's last reworkings of its portraits. The prints are denser in symbology as well as material application, and this hallway serves as a bridge into works filled with the deeper anxieties of both Johns and Munch. Munch's lifelong closeness with disease is evident throughout his career, whereas John steps into this motif much later. The syphilis-induced lesions present on the skin of a mother and child in Inheritance reappear on John's molds of body parts, now addressing the contraction of AIDS. Both Johns and Munch present these epidemics as evolving societal ills. The shared references between artists continues as you see Johns begin to adapt shadows as icons of himself. More of Munch's works becomes present here as a means to emphasize John's more intentional borrowing of motifs than previously shown. As Munch has always dealt with darkness, Johns begins to do the same, but still with more life imbued. The last gallery of the exhibit addresses the passage of time in life and in the artist's development. John's practice of borrowing becomes more recognizable, pulling from more common motifs and making them personal. We also see Munch taking inspiration, as in his Starry Night. Photographs and paintings are grouped in fours, underscoring John's season series and the overall cyclical nature of life. The availability of open notebooks, along with a variety of both of their portraits, leaves the viewer in one of the most intimate and telling of spaces, the artist's studio. After the exhibit, there's an area for younger viewers to organize objects referenced throughout the exhibit according to their own personal meanings and upload their photos to social media. There's also a board with varied string colors and thicknesses, each color linked to an emotion. The colors reflect those of John's crosshatches and allows the viewers to interact in a sense. The exhibit offers a free audio tour accessible via the VMFA website, which can be difficult when it comes to the Wi-Fi. Narrated by Ravenel, there's 21 tour stops altogether indicated on the wall labels. The tour does a better job of unpacking meaning while relating the artists to each other than the text labels because he directs the viewer to note several works in the room. The seating arrangements throughout are largely in front of more monumental works, as expected, especially in the recreation of the bedroom. However, that gallery could have benefited more from clustered seating to emphasize intimacy over vastness. The rooms were dimly lit, allowing the walls to darken around the works, which are lit by crosshatch lighting, requiring a much more up-close inspection to pick out details. The lighting was subtle and certainly more familiar than spotlights could have been, adding to the personal nature of the works. Throughout the exhibit are copies of Ravenel's Inspiration and Transformation. Without this and the audio tour, it felt more difficult to make the connections, especially with the crosshatches. Having analyzed John's Between the Clock and the Bedroom before this exhibit, I was expecting the two works together sooner than I did. There's an emphasis on repetition that without the additional information could become visually redundant. Overall, Love, Loss, and the Cycle of Life is an isolated retrospective of John's motif works. His comfortability with expressing the body is accounted to Munch in a manner not addressed before, which only benefits the growing narratives behind his appropriative works. The only thing I would have liked to see would have been John's sculptural work, which could have really elevated the bedroom and Savrin series.